Sir, step away from the gate. You're trespassing.
This is my daughter's home. I live here. I'm waiting for her.
You don't match the resident.
The afternoon air was thick with heat when the voice cut through the quiet street. Sir, step away from the property right now. You are trespassing. The man slowly turned around. Late 60s, gray close-cut hair, plain navy jacket, khaki pants. His hands were empty, resting calmly at his sides. Behind him stood a wrought iron gate leading into a quiet residential complex, manicured lawns, American flags on porches, the kind of place where neighbors waved at each other in the mornings. Trespassing. The man spoke evenly. This is my residence. I am waiting for my daughter. The officer did not lower his voice. He took one step closer. His hand hovered near his holster, not touching it, but close enough to send a message. I asked you to step away. You do not match the resident description. Someone reported a suspicious individual loitering near the entrance. The sun reflected off the officer's body camera. A cicada buzzed somewhere in the trees. A delivery truck passed at the end of the street, its engine briefly drowning out the tension. When the sound faded, the silence felt heavier than before. I live here, the man repeated. His tone did not rise. His posture did not change. I have identification inside the unit. If you allow me to retrieve it, I will. No, the officer snapped. You stay right where you are. Turn around. A woman across the street froze mid-step, grocery bags hanging from her wrist. A teenager on a bicycle slowed down. Curtains shifted behind windows. Eyes were watching now. Sir, I am asking you one last time, the officer said. Place your hands behind your back. The man exhaled through his nose, slow and controlled. He glanced briefly at the gate, then back at the officer. His eyes showed something deeper than anger. Not fear either. Recognition. The kind that comes from having seen this moment before in different uniforms, different decades. This is unnecessary, he said quietly. You are making a mistake. The officer interpreted the calm as defiance. His jaw tightened, his shoulders squared. To him, this was no longer a conversation. It was a challenge. Turn around now. The man complied. Slowly, deliberately. Each movement measured. His wrists came together behind his back. The metallic click of the handcuffs echoed louder than it should have. A phone camera lifted from the sidewalk, then another. What did he do? Someone whispered. The officer guided him toward the patrol car. The man did not resist. He did not speak. The door opened. The plastic seat inside gleamed in the sunlight. As the door shut, the officer radioed in. Male subject detained for trespassing. Refused to leave private property. Inside the car, the man stared straight ahead. His reflection stared back at him in the tinted glass. A lifetime of service. A lifetime of command. Reduced to this moment on a quiet suburban street. None of them knew it yet. Not the officer, not the neighbors, not the people recording. They had just handcuffed a retired Major General of the United States Army. The story did not begin at the Iron Gate, or with the click of handcuffs. It began decades earlier in a different neighborhood, one without manicured lawns or private security patrols. The man in the back of the patrol car had been born in 1956 on the south side of Chicago. His father worked nights at a steel mill. His mother cleaned offices downtown. The apartment was small, the walls thin, and the lessons were constant. Keep your head down. Speak clearly. Never give anyone a reason to doubt you belong. By the time he was 12, he had already learned how quickly a uniform could change the way a man was treated, and how quickly the absence of one could make you invisible. At 18, he enlisted in the United States Army. Vietnam had just ended, but the military was still reckoning with race discipline and distrust. He was assigned to an infantry unit where he learned early that competence was the only armor that never failed. He ran farther, studied longer, spoke less. When others complained, he observed. When others hesitated, he stepped forward. His superiors noticed. He became an officer in his late 20s. Then a commander, then a strategist. He served overseas multiple times in regions most Americans only saw on evening news broadcasts. He led patrols through hostile terrain. He made decisions that sent men home alive and others home in flag-draped coffins. Every order he gave carried weight. Every mistake followed him to sleep. He learned restraint not as politeness, but as survival. By the time he reached general rank, he had briefed presidents, testified before congressional committees, and negotiated with foreign military leaders. His voice had carried authority in rooms where silence followed every word. He had commanded tens of thousands of soldiers, managed billion-dollar logistics operations, and been trusted with national security decisions that never made headlines. When he retired, his service record filled binders. Medals lined a shadow box in his study. He did not display them publicly. He had nothing left to prove. The house behind the iron gate was his daughter's. She had insisted he move closer after her mother passed. The neighborhood was quiet, safe, or so it was supposed to be. He walked the grounds in the afternoons, waiting for her to come home from work, enjoying the rare luxury of unstructured time. He wore plain clothes because he liked anonymity. Because after a lifetime of command blending in felt like freedom. The officer who stopped him came from a different story. He joined the police force straight out of the academy. He grew up believing law enforcement was about control, order, authority. His training reinforced it. Identify threats, establish dominance. Do not hesitate. His supervisors praised him for being proactive, aggressive, assertive. Complaints followed him quietly through internal systems. Excessive stops. Discourtesy. Escalation. Each time the reports ended the same way. Insufficient evidence. Officer acted with indiscretion. Over the years, something hardened in him. Calls about suspicious persons irritated him less than they should have. They were familiar. Easy. A black man standing where someone thought he did not belong fit a pattern he had seen too many times to question. He arrived already convinced he understood the situation. When the retired general spoke calmly, it felt wrong to the officer. Calm was supposed to come after compliance, not before. Calm sounded like challenge. When the man did not raise his voice, the officer heard disrespect. When he did not rush to explain himself, the officer saw arrogance. Training told him hesitation was weakness, and weakness invited loss of control. There was also the audience, neighbors watching, phones recording. A moment where backing down would look like failure. The officer felt it in his chest, the familiar pressure to assert himself. To prove he was in charge. He did not know he was facing a man who had commanded battlefields. He only saw someone who did not respond the way he expected. The retired general recognized the signs instantly. He had seen young officers like this in other uniforms. Overconfident, unchecked, backed by systems that rarely questioned them. He knew arguing would change nothing. He knew raising his voice would only justify escalation. He also knew something else. That history had taught him patience in moments where others demanded submission. As the patrol car pulled away from the curb, both men sat in silence. One believed he had just handled a routine trespassing call. The other understood he was watching the opening move of a much larger reckoning. Neither of them yet grasped how much this arrest would expose, or how many people would soon be forced to confront what happens when authority meets assumption. The patrol car rolled slowly toward the exit of the neighborhood. The officer glanced at the rearview mirror, watching the man in the back seat. Calm, upright, eyes forward, no slouching, no shaking. It unsettled him. Dispatch crackled through the radio. Unit 12, confirm reason for detention. Trespassing, the officer replied. Subject refused to leave private property after verbal commands. Inside the car, the retired general closed his eyes briefly. Not in defeat, in calculation. He memorized the cadence of the officer's voice, the phrasing, the assumptions baked into every word. They stopped at a red light. A white SUV pulled up beside them. The driver stared, then looked away. A cyclist rode past, slowed, turned his head, and reached for his phone. The general spoke for the first time since the cuffs went on. Officer, may I ask which property owner reported me? The officer did not turn around. Someone in the neighborhood. That is all you need to know. I am a resident family member, the general said. My name is on the access list. This will be resolved quickly if you verify it. Silence. The officer tightened his grip on the steering wheel. He could feel the eyes outside the car, the cameras, the judgment. He did not like being questioned from the back seat. You had your chance to explain, he said. You chose not to comply. The general looked out the window. He had complied. He always did. He knew the difference between obedience and surrender. They arrived back at the street entrance where more people had gathered. The patrol car pulled over. Another unit arrived. 2 officers stepped out. Younger. Curious. One glanced at the man in cuffs, then at the iron gate behind them. What is going on? One asked quietly. Suspicious trespasser, the arresting officer said. Refused to leave. The general lifted his head slightly. Officers, I am requesting that you verify my identity before this proceeds any further. There are documents inside the residence. One of the younger officers hesitated. Sir, do you have identification on you? Yes, the general said. In my wallet, left side jacket pocket. The arresting officer snapped. He is not reaching for anything. A woman across the street stepped forward. I live here, she said. I see him all the time. He waits for his daughter. Another voice joined in. He did not do anything wrong. Phones were fully raised now. The officer felt the moment slipping. Control was harder to maintain with witnesses narrating the scene in real time. Sir, the younger officer said carefully, maybe we should slow this down. The arresting officer turned on him. I have it under control. The general watched the exchange. He saw the fracture forming. The crowd had changed the equation. Authority no longer moved in one direction. Then a car pulled through the gate behind them. A woman in business attire stepped out. She froze when she saw the scene. Dad. Her voice cut through everything. The general turned his head. His expression did not change, but his eyes softened. I am here, he said. She looked from the cuffs to the officers. What is happening? Trespassing investigation, the arresting officer said. She stared at him. This is my father. This is my home. The street went quiet. The officer felt the shift too late. The narrative he had built began to collapse under its own weight. He reached for his radio again, his voice no longer steady. Dispatch, run the name. We need verification. The general finally spoke with full clarity. My name is on record. I suggest you check it carefully. Because once you do, there is no undoing what has already happened. The crowd leaned in. The phones kept recording. And somewhere between the radio static and the murmurs, the truth was about to surface. The officer did not remove the handcuffs. Not yet. Instead, he opened the rear door of the patrol car and gestured sharply. Step out. The retired general complied. Again. Slowly. His shoes touched the pavement. The sun had dipped lower now, casting long shadows across the street. The heat lingered, but the air felt heavier, as if everyone present sensed they were crossing a line that could not be erased. The officer positioned him beside the car, one hand gripping his arm just tightly enough to assert control. The metal cuffs pressed into aging wrists that had once worn dress blues and 4 stars. The general did not wince. He stared straight ahead. Sir, the officer said you are being detained until we confirm your story. The word story hung there. The daughter stepped closer, her phone already recording. This is not a story. This is my father. He lives here. You are hurting him. Ma'am, step back, the officer ordered. A neighbor spoke up. You do not need to hold him like that. Another voice. This is wrong. The officer's jaw clenched. He tightened his grip. The general felt it. The pressure. The message. You do not decide how this ends. The second unit stood nearby, uncertain. One officer shifted his weight. He had run the name through his mind already. Something about the posture, the bearing. This man did not carry himself like someone caught trespassing. Sir, he said carefully, dispatch is still running your information. Good, the general replied. His voice was steady. They will find what they need. The arresting officer scoffed. We will see. He guided the general back toward the patrol car, not to release him, but to transport him downtown. The door opened. The hard plastic seat waited. At that moment, the cuffs caught briefly on the frame. The general's shoulders tensed as the metal scraped skin. A small sound escaped him. Not pain, surprise. The daughter reacted instantly. Stop, you are hurting him. The officer pushed him inside anyway. The door slammed shut. The sound echoed. Phones captured it from 3 angles. Inside the car, the general sat upright. His breathing slowed. In his mind, he cataloged everything. Time, location, names, badge numbers, the radio traffic, the witnesses. This was no longer about dignity. It was about record. The patrol car pulled away under a chorus of voices. Someone shouted that they would call a lawyer. Someone else said this would be on the news tonight. At the station, the fluorescent lights buzzed. The smell of disinfectant and old coffee filled the intake area. The officer led the general inside. Other officers glanced up. Some paused. They took in the sight of an elderly black man in cuffs, calm, silent, composed. What is the charge? The desk sergeant asked. Trespassing, the officer replied. And refusal to comply. The sergeant looked at the general. Sir, do you have identification? Yes, the general said. In my wallet. Please retrieve it. The officer hesitated, then handed it over. The sergeant opened the wallet. His eyes moved from the driver's license to the veteran identification card, then to another card. Then he stopped. He looked up slowly. Then he looked again. The room felt smaller. The injustice had already happened. The cuffs, the car, the street. the humiliation. What came next would not undo it. It would only decide who paid for it. The desk sergeant did not speak at first. He studied the card again, then turned it sideways under the light as if expecting it to change. It did not. The seal was unmistakable. The name, the rank, Retired Major General United States Army. The sergeant lifted his eyes slowly and looked at the man in front of him. His posture shifted just slightly. Respect replacing routine. "Sir," he said carefully, "how long have you been retired?" 7 years, the general replied. The room went quiet. The arresting officer felt it before he understood it. The air changed. The casual confidence drained from his stance. He stepped closer to the desk. "What is it?" he asked. The sergeant did not answer immediately. He turned the screen toward himself and typed the name again. Then he picked up the phone and dialed an internal extension. "Lieutenant, I need you at intake, now." The officer's throat tightened. He glanced at the general. For the first time since the encounter began, he really looked at him. The bearing, the stillness, the discipline that had never wavered even in handcuffs. "This has to be a mistake," the officer said quietly. "Anyone can print a card." The sergeant's eyes snapped up. "This is not printed. This is verified." Footsteps approached fast. A lieutenant entered the room, mid-40s, crisp uniform, eyes sharp. He took in the scene in seconds. "What do we have?" The sergeant handed him the wallet. The lieutenant opened it, saw the card, then looked at the general. "Sir, are you Major General Harris?" "I am," the general said. The lieutenant swallowed. He glanced at the cuffs. "Why is he restrained?" "Trespassing," the officer said, his voice no longer steady. "He was on private property and refused to leave." The general spoke calmly. "I was standing outside my daughter's home. She confirmed this on scene." The lieutenant turned slowly toward the officer. His eyes did not blink. "Did you verify residency?" "No, sir." "Did you retrieve identification on scene?" "No, sir." "Did you call a supervisor?" "No, sir." Each question landed heavier than the last. "Remove the cuffs, now." The officer hesitated for half a second too long. Then he reached forward and unlocked them. The metal fell away. Red marks ringed the general's wrists. The lieutenant straightened. "Sir, on behalf of this department, I apologize." The general nodded once. He did not smile. The officer stood frozen. His career flashed through his mind in fragments. Body camera footage, civilian videos, the radio logs, the witnesses, the name on that card. He understood now. This was not a misunderstanding. It was a revelation, and there would be consequences. The general did not leave the station quietly. He did not storm out. He did not raise his voice. He sat in a plastic chair beneath flickering fluorescent lights while paperwork moved slowly around him. Time was documented now. Every second counted. The lieutenant made the calls that should have been made an hour earlier. Internal affairs. The watch commander. Legal counsel. The officer stood off to the side, silent, his body camera still blinking red, recording everything he wished it had not. The general's daughter arrived minutes later. She said nothing at first. She simply looked at her father's wrists. The marks were already darkening. "This is going to be addressed," the lieutenant said. "Immediately." "It already is," the general replied. By the next morning, the videos were everywhere. The arrest from the sidewalk, the handcuffs, the slammed door, the daughter's voice breaking through the scene. Millions watched, millions paused, millions recognized something they had seen before, even if this time the man in cuffs had commanded armies. Civil rights attorneys contacted the family before noon. The department issued a statement by afternoon. An internal investigation was announced. The language was careful. Administrative leave, review of procedures, commitment to transparency. The general filed a federal complaint 2 days later. The complaint was precise. It cited unlawful detention, false arrest, violation of constitutional rights, failure to de-escalate, racial profiling, each claim backed by timestamps, footage, radio logs, witness statements. The officer was suspended pending investigation. His prior complaints resurfaced. Patterns emerged. Stops that escalated. Warnings that went unheeded. Supervisors who signed off and moved on. The department could not outrun the evidence this time. Within weeks, the officer was terminated. His appeal denied. His name entered into a database that followed him beyond the badge. The city entered settlement negotiations shortly after. The amount was substantial. The general donated a portion to legal defense funds for civilians who did not have rank or recognition to shield them. The neighborhood went quiet again. Lawns trimmed, gates closed, but something had changed. The general returned to his routine. Walks in the afternoon, waiting for his daughter. Plain clothes, calm posture. But now, when neighbors waved, it felt different. Less assumption, more awareness. He gave one statement to the press. "I served this country for most of my life," he said. "But this did not happen because of what I did. It happened because of how I looked. If it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone." The story moved through courtrooms and classrooms, through training sessions and policy meetings, through comment sections and dinner tables. Justice was served, some said. The general would not call it that. He called it exposure. What happened on that quiet street was not just a mistake. It was a textbook violation of constitutional law and understanding why matters more than the settlement amount or the officer's termination. Under the Fourth Amendment, a police officer cannot detain or arrest someone without reasonable suspicion or probable cause. Standing outside a residence, waiting for a family member, wearing plain clothes. None of those facts constitute a crime. Trespassing requires proof that a person knowingly remained on property without permission. In this case, permission existed and verification was available within minutes. The decision to escalate was not based on evidence. It was based on assumption. There is also the concept of investigative detention. Officers may briefly stop someone to clarify a situation, but the moment handcuffs come out, the law treats it as an arrest. An arrest demands a higher legal threshold. That threshold was never met. The continued detention after the daughter arrived and confirmed residency compounded the violation. Each additional minute became a separate legal failure. From a psychological perspective, this incident illustrates implicit bias. Bias does not require hatred. It often appears as pattern recognition built from unchecked assumptions. The officer believed he knew what did not belong in that space. Every calm response was interpreted as defiance. Every explanation was filtered through a preconceived narrative. Once that narrative formed, contradictory evidence was ignored. This is how escalation happens. Authority meets assumption. Ego replaces inquiry. And a situation that could have ended with a conversation turns into a handcuffed human being. So what should someone do if they find themselves in a similar position? First, remain calm. Escalation feeds off emotion. Calm preserves options and credibility. Second, comply, physically but not verbally. Surrender your rights. You can state that you do not consent and that you are complying under protest. Third, document everything if possible. Ask witnesses to record. Cameras create accountability where memory fails. Fourth, do not argue legal theory on the street. Save it for later. Courts are safer than curbsides. And finally, know that dignity does not come from winning the moment. It comes from surviving it and forcing the system to confront itself afterward. This story resonates because the man in handcuffs had every symbol of honor our society claims to respect. Rank, service, sacrifice. And none of it mattered in that moment. What mattered was perception. The lesson is not that credentials protect you. They do not. The lesson is that rights only matter when they are defended, documented, and demanded after the fact. So ask yourself this. If the law failed a retired major general in broad daylight with witnesses and cameras, how often does it fail people with no rank, no platform, and no protection? And what will you do if you ever see it happening in front of you?